The Bible recounts tales of the most malevolent queens alongside their wicked king counterparts. These queens often spurred their husbands towards wrongdoing or committed grievous acts themselves under the guise of their husband's authority. One notorious example is Jezebel, the queen of Israel. God had instructed the Israelites not to marry foreigners who practiced paganism. However, Ahab ignored God's directive and chose Jezebel, a princess from Sidon and the daughter of Ethbaal, king of the Zidonians, as his wife. Together, Ahab and Jezebel plunged the kingdom of Israel deeper into the sin of idolatry by promoting the worship of Baal throughout the realm. Jezebel herself came from a line of Phoenician royalty. Her father, Ethbaal, was both a king and a priest in the cities of Tyre and Sidon. In Phoenician, her name meant primrose, yet in Hebrew it translated to garbage, a reflection of her reputation in the Old Testament narratives. Ahab, Jezebel's husband, ruled over Israel during this period and was notorious for his own evil deeds, surpassing even Jeroboam in idol worship. According to the biblical Book of Kings, Ahab was deemed the most sinful of all the kings of Israel, causing immense turmoil throughout his 22-year reign. Jezebel, as his wife, clearly wielded her influence over Ahab, using him as a tool to achieve her dark objectives with little effort needed to sway him. For the first time, an Israeli king had formed a marital alliance with a pagan princess. She was a devout follower of Baal. Jezebel decided she would replace the worship of the Lord God with the sinister rites of Baal worship, 1 Kings 18:19. Therefore, summon all Israel to Mount Carmel, along with 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of the groves who dine at Jezebel's table. Under Ahab's rule, the worship of Baal spread extensively throughout Israel, and it also impacted Judah. Different regions adopted distinct ways of honoring Baal, portraying him as a widely revered deity. In various places, specific attributes of Baal were emphasized, giving rise to unique factions within Baalism. Sculptures portray Baal wearing a helmet topped with bull horns, signifying strength and fertility. In one hand, he carries a club or mace, likely symbolizing thunder, and in the other a leafy spear, representing both lightning and vegetation. After her marriage to Ahab, Jezebel successfully persuaded him to embrace Baal. She was a power-hungry woman who relentlessly crushed anyone who opposed her. Unbound by moral scruples and fearless of both divine and human judgment, she fervently promoted her pagan beliefs. She was relentless in maintaining the splendor of idolatry surrounding her. Her actions had a profoundly negative impact on both the kingdoms of Israel and Judah. Chapter 21 of the Book of Kings details the grim finale for Jezebel and Ahab. Few couples in the Bible are as unsavory as King Ahab and Queen Jezebel. By the end of 1 Kings, their repugnant and morally reprehensible acts are laid bare. Lacking any semblance of inspiring leadership, they relied on manipulation, greed, and shrewd tactics to fulfill their ambitions. The setting is in Jezreel, home to their royal residence. Adjacent to this palace lay a vineyard owned by Naboth the Jezreelite, which Ahab coveted for a vegetable garden. However, Naboth declined to sell or trade his land, adhering to the Israelite law that dictated land should remain within the family it was originally allotted to, Numbers 36:7. The law stated, "Therefore no inheritance of the Israelites shall be passed from one tribe to another, for each member of the Israelites must keep to the ancestral inheritance of their tribe." When Jezebel noticed her husband's sour mood over Naboth's refusal, she reassured him that he would soon possess the vineyard, 1 Kings 21:8-16. In her scheme, she drafted letters in Ahab's name, sealed them with his seal, and dispatched them to the local elders and nobles residing in Naboth's town. In her manipulative letters, Jezebel wrote, Declare a fast and place Naboth in a prominent position among the people. Seat 2 disreputable and morally bankrupt men opposite him to accuse him of blasphemy, claiming, "He has cursed both God and the king." Afterward, lead him out and stone him to death. Accordingly, the city's elders and nobles who resided there complied with Jezebel's instructions exactly as she had dictated in her letters. They called for a fast, positioning Naboth prominently among the community. 2 deceitful men entered and sat opposite him, levying false charges against Naboth in front of the assembly, accusing him of cursing God and the king. Subsequently, they took him outside the city limits and executed him by stoning. Upon his death, they informed Jezebel that Naboth had been killed. When Jezebel received confirmation of Naboth's death, she immediately told Ahab, "Get up and take over the vineyard of Naboth the Jezreelite, which he refused to sell to you, for Naboth is no longer alive, but dead." Hearing of Naboth's demise, Ahab wasted no time in going down to claim the vineyard. Jezebel, ever cunning and ruthless, had orchestrated Naboth's downfall to appear as a lawful execution for violating divine law. Furthermore, she orchestrated the elimination of Naboth's sons, knowing that without heirs the land would default to the king, further solidifying her and Ahab's control. The malevolent Queen Jezebel was both systematic and ruthless in her plots. As Ahab set out to take possession of the vineyard, he encountered Elijah, who immediately condemned him for his crimes of murder and theft. Elijah foretold the grim fates awaiting them. Ahab would meet a violent death, Jezebel would be eaten by dogs in Jezreel, and their descendants would be denied a dignified burial. This severe judgment reflected the extent of Ahab's depravity in his idolatrous pursuits. The scriptures remark that Ahab was unrivaled in his willingness to commit acts of evil. Upon hearing of the divine prophecy of his ruin, Ahab humbled himself before the Lord in a gesture of repentance. Moved by Ahab's contrition, the Lord declared that the execution of the judgments upon his family would be postponed until after his death. Jezebel's notorious actions included the massacre of God's prophets, 1 Kings 18:4, prompting Obadiah to hide 100 of the Lord's prophets in 2 caves in groups of 50, providing them with sustenance, 1 Kings 18:30. Has it not been told to my lord Elijah what I did when Jezebel killed the prophets of the Lord? How I hid 100 of the Lord's prophets by 50s in a cave and provided them with bread and water. Additionally, Jezebel relentlessly pursued Elijah himself, seeking to kill him, 1 Kings 19:1-4. Ahab relayed to Jezebel everything Elijah had accomplished, including the annihilation of all the Baal prophets with the sword. In retaliation, Jezebel sent a messenger to Elijah with a death threat, declaring, "May the gods deal with me, be it ever so severely, if by this time tomorrow your life is not like that of one of them." Terrified, Elijah fled for his life. He traveled to Beersheba in Judah, where he left his servant, and then ventured alone into the wilderness. Exhausted, he collapsed under a juniper tree and prayed for death, lamenting, "It is enough now, O Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors." Elijah's fear drove him further to Horeb as he sought refuge from Jezebel's wrath. Ultimately, her demise unfolded as prophesied. Years later, Ahab was killed in combat with the Syrians, yet Jezebel maintained her reign for almost a decade after his death. Following Elijah, his successor Elisha continued the mission to eradicate Baal worship. He orchestrated the rise of Jehu as the king of Israel, a move that incited a civil war since Jehoram, the son of Ahab and Jezebel, was then the reigning monarch. Jehu, who had served as a charioteer for Ahab and Jehoram, was strategically positioned on Israel's border with Damascus and Assyria. Throughout history, Jezebel has been portrayed as the epitome of deceit, malice, spite, and cruelty. As Jehu entered the gates of Jezreel, Jezebel peered from the palace window and questioned, "Did Zimri find peace after murdering his master?" Jehu looked up and signaled to her attendants, who then threw her from the window. The street dogs swiftly devoured her, fulfilling the prophecy of Elijah the Tishbite following the affair of Naboth's vineyard, 1 Kings 21:19. The prophecy had stated, "Thus says the Lord, have you murdered and also usurped? In the place where dogs licked Naboth's blood, dogs will also lick your blood." From then on, her name became synonymous with evil. However, there is this criticism against you. You allow that woman Jezebel, who claims to be a prophetess, to lead my followers astray with teachings that encourage sexual immorality and the consumption of food offered to idols. Revelation 2:20. If you thought Jezebel was dreadful, let me tell you about her second daughter, Athaliah, the queen of Judah. Athaliah, daughter of Ahab, king of Israel, married Jehoram, son of Jehoshaphat. She proved to be just as malevolent as her mother, Jezebel, her father, Ahab, and her brothers, Ahaziah and Joram. Her name, meaning afflicted by God, Athaliah ruled as queen of Judah from 841 to 835 BC. She occupied King David's throne during a period marked by the reigns of many corrupt kings and queens. A staunch worshipper of Baal, Athaliah's rule was characterized by the same level of wickedness as those who preceded and followed her. Athaliah's husband, Jehoram, reigned as the king of Judah until his death in 841 BC. Unlike his father, Jehoram embraced evil practices. His son, Ahaziah, took the throne at the age of 22 and proved just as nefarious as his predecessors. Under Athaliah's guidance, Ahaziah engaged in numerous wicked activities, 2 Chronicles 22:3, Amplified Bible, with his mother serving as his counselor and urging him towards malevolence. Ahaziah's reign over Judah was brief, lasting less than a year before he met his end. He was assassinated alongside the ailing King Joram of Israel by Jehu, who had been a commander under King Ahab, 2 Kings 9:25. During this incident, Jehu ordered his officer Bidkar to throw Joram's body into the plot of land once owned by Naboth the Jezreelite, recalling a prophecy the Lord had made during a ride with Ahab. Jehu's rise to power was marked by his anointment as the new king of Israel by the prophet Elisha, who designated him as the divine agent to execute the judgments decreed against Ahab's lineage due to their idolatry. This included the execution of Ahab's wife Jezebel and their sons. The assassination of Ahaziah was incidental, as he was visiting Joram at the time Jehu executed his plan to eliminate Joram. Consequently, Ahaziah was also killed in the purge, 2 Chronicles 22:10-12. This marked a pivotal point in Jehu's mission to dismantle the corrupt dynasty established by Ahab and Jezebel. When Athaliah, the mother of Ahaziah, learned of her son's death, she set out to eliminate the entire royal bloodline of Judah. However, Jehosheba, the daughter of King Jehoram, swiftly rescued Joash, the young son of Ahaziah, from among the princes destined for slaughter. She secreted him and his nurse in a bedroom. Being both the daughter of King Jehoram and the wife of the priest Jehoiada, and sister to Ahaziah, Jehosheba was uniquely positioned to protect the child from Athaliah, ensuring the young prince's survival. For 6 years, as Athaliah tyrannically governed, Joash remained concealed in the temple of God. Driven by loss and the dark influence believed to be Satan, who aimed to sever the messianic lineage as before and would attempt in times to come, Athaliah took drastic measures by claiming the throne through the murder of her own grandchildren. Meanwhile, motivated by the divine promise in Genesis 3:15, which assured the preservation of the lineage from which Jesus Christ would emerge, Jehosheba was inspired to hide her nephew. During these 6 years, Joash was nurtured and safeguarded in the temple by Jehoiada the priest, remaining out of Athaliah's reach, 2 Kings 11:2. Jehosheba, daughter of King Joram of Judah and half-sister to Ahaziah, saved Joash, Ahaziah's son, from the fatal fate that awaited the king's sons. She spirited him away from danger and concealed him and his nurse in a bedroom, effectively shielding him from Athaliah, thus sparing his life, 2 Chronicles 24:7. Athaliah's sons, embodying their mother's wickedness, had desecrated the house of God, using sacred items dedicated to the Lord for the worship of Baal. Unbeknownst to Athaliah, one grandchild survived her brutal purge. Like her predecessors, she was a devotee of Baal, a deity widely revered in ancient Canaan and Phoenicia. During the era of King Ahab and Queen Jezebel, Baal worship reached its zenith in Israel, prompting God to intervene directly against this idolatry through his prophet Elijah. To demonstrate his supremacy over Baal, God initiated a drought that lasted 3.5 years, emphasizing that he alone commanded the natural elements. Baal worship had infiltrated Jewish religious practices since the time of the Judges. After 6 years of Athaliah's reign, Jehoiada the high priest took decisive action. He stationed guards at the temple and orchestrated a public ceremony to crown the young Joash as the rightful king. As Joash was anointed, the assembly erupted in applause and chants of "Long live the king," 2 Kings 11:12. Jehoiada then presented the young monarch with the crown and the testimony, the copy of the Mosaic law. This act solidified Joash's ascension to the throne, greeted by the joyful acclamations of the people, reaffirming, "Long live the king," 2 Chronicles 23:12-13. When Athaliah heard the commotion of people running and celebrating the king, she approached the crowd at the temple of the Lord. Upon arriving, she saw the king standing by his column at the entrance. Officers and trumpeters flanked the king, while the joyful people of the land played trumpets, and musicians led the praises with their instruments. In a moment of fury, Athaliah tore her robes and cried out, "Treason! Treason!" She had come to the temple driven by the noise, only to discover the young king, whom she believed to be dead, crowned and supported by the jubilant crowd. The sight of the child king and the overwhelming support he received from the people must have deepened her shock and fear. Ignored by the crowd and seen as the true usurper, her accusations of treason fell on deaf ears. Jehoiada the priest then commanded that she be taken away, but specifically ordered that she not be killed within the sacred bounds of the temple. Instead, she was led to the horse gate, where she was executed for her numerous crimes against Judah. This narrative serves as a reminder that while some ascend to power driven by a genuine passion for their cause and a sense of duty, others seek leadership merely to wield control and savor the intoxicating sense of superiority that comes with power. In many cases, it doesn't take long to discern the nature of a leader. The situation with Athaliah was instantly clear. Upon hearing of her son King Ahaziah's death by Jehu's hand, she swiftly eliminated all possible royal successors from the house of Judah, including her own grandchildren. However, she failed to kill Joash, the sole surviving child, thanks to Jehosheba, a devout young woman who hid him in the temple of God. For 6 years, Joash evaded Athaliah's murderous intentions, fulfilling the divine promise that the Messiah would emerge from the royal line of David, a lineage that meant nothing to Athaliah. Her actions depict a leader whose insatiable thirst for power led her to commit the most heinous acts, including the killing of her own family, to secure and maintain her usurped position. Athaliah's rule over Judah lasted 7 years before she was forcibly removed from power by the people. Her reign stands as a stark example of leadership driven not by altruism, but by a ruthless pursuit of power, prestige, and status. It's usually quite apparent when a leader's motivations are so starkly skewed. Number 3. Herodias, Queen of Galilee. Known for her notorious reputation, Herodias will always be remembered for her role in the demise of John the Baptist. Described in the scriptures as the wife of Philip, who was also Herod the Tetrarch's brother, Herodias later became the spouse of Herod Antipas, blatantly disregarding the law while her first husband was still alive. John the Baptist boldly condemned their illicit union, infuriating Herodias to the extent that she sought his death. Her influence led to John's arrest and imprisonment by Herod Antipas, driven by her vindictive desire. Although she pushed for John's execution, Herod Antipas hesitated, fearing public backlash and recognizing John as a man of integrity. During a banquet celebrating his birthday, Herod was so impressed by the dance performed by Herodias' daughter that he vowed impulsively to fulfill any wish she expressed. Mark 6:17-28, Amplified Bible. It was Herod himself who had ordered John's arrest and confinement over his marriage to Herodias, since John had openly criticized him, stating, "It is not lawful under Mosaic law for you to have your brother's wife." Despite her deep animosity towards John, Herodias was unable to have him killed as Herod, aware of John's righteousness and sanctity, protected him. Even though Herod was often confused by John's words, he found himself intrigued and continued to listen to him. However, a perfect opportunity for Herodias arose during a lavish birthday celebration held by Herod. The event was attended by high-ranking officials, nobles, courtiers, military commanders, and the eminent men of Galilee. It was during this event that Salome, Herodias' daughter, performed a dance that captivated Herod and his guests. Charmed by her performance, the king offered her any wish, promising, "Ask of me whatever you desire, and it shall be yours," even pledging up to half his kingdom. After consulting with her mother, Salome returned to Herod and demanded, "I wish for the head of John the Baptist to be presented to me on a platter immediately." Distressed by the request, Herod nevertheless felt compelled to comply due to his vows and the presence of his guests, who might perceive his refusal as a sign of weakness. Thus, he promptly ordered an executioner to carry out the deed. The executioner then beheaded John in the prison, returned with his head on a platter, and presented it to Salome. Salome then delivered the gruesome gift to her mother, Herodias.